You're listening to the Raccoon Roundtable podcast, episode number 69. I'm your host, David Ori, and I'm here with my two co-hosts. First,
Chris Agana and
Allysa Ong, and on today's episode, we talked about communicating with our parents. Hope you guys enjoy it.
so we have a very special guest today. I mean, she's not even a guest, I guess. You can't even, you don't qualify as a guest anymore. She's an integral part of the Raccoon Rounds team. And I'll let you introduce yourself, like let everyone know. And this is not the first time you've heard her voice, that's for sure. Or even seen her on screen, or seen her on Instagram. So go ahead and let everyone know, like a brief introduction about who you are, where you are, what you do, and how you're involved in Raccoon Rounds.
Hey guys, it's Allysa. You know you miss me. I'm just kidding. I am, as I've mentioned previously, I'm a current pharmacy student. I'm in my 4th year now, which is crazy. I'm also involved with working with David and Chris here in Raccoon Rounds, and I'm just so excited to be here. I love talking to you guys and working with you guys. It's so much fun. So I'm glad to be back.
yeah, and like David said, you're not a guest. You're like the third host. You're the third host today. That's what this is,
Oh,
And I know that in the near future you'll be hosting as well. If you're listening or watching, you may have seen that Rachel actually co-hosted with one of our previous episodes. So we're gonna have more of our team helping with hosting. But today, I think we're going to talk about communication, in particular communicating with our parents. As we mentioned before, everybody on our team is Filipino American, and we all, I'm pretty sure, have our own experiences with communicating with our parents growing up. I guess, David, do you want to start off? Like, how was it growing up with your parents? Was it always an open communication? I mean, I feel like a lot of times, and sorry if I'm rambling, but I think the stereotype is maybe the dads are a little more closed off with communication is what they say, and maybe the moms are a little more open. Was that the type of experience you had, or what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean that stereotype, I think that's pretty accurate. But honestly, I think my growing up, communicating with my parents was pretty like non-stereotypical, and just kind of like what you said. It was very I wouldn't necessarily say like open, or I guess I would describe it differently. I would say that it was communication was encouraged. It was like very, very encouraged. And I feel like I mean, maybe a lot of people can relate to this, that communication sometimes, especially about certain topics, was discouraged. Maybe about like finances or money or relationships. Like if you were about to like bring home somebody to introduce to your family, that's like a no. You don't talk about that. But like with my parents, I felt that it was they just like encouraged me to continue to just talk to them. They always asked questions, always, man. And you guys have met my parents as well, and like they're like pros at asking questions, so that's just like how they are. And that's kind of how I grew up, honestly. And I say that, that it was very non-stereotypical, because I know that like when I had friends come over, especially like in high school, my parents would like just be talking with my friends like they were their own kids, and I know that people would comment, they're like, man, like my parents don't really talk to me like the way that your parents talk to me, so yeah, I knew it was kind of different. But like, what about you, Allysa? What was it kind of like growing up, communicating with your parents?
Yeah, that's actually crazy that you say that, David, because growing up for me, it's the total opposite. And I feel like now as I'm getting older, I'm still on this journey of learning how to communicate with my parents, my family in general. But yeah, growing up, I never really felt like they would, be the first one to initiate the conversation, even say like, how are you? Like genuinely, how are you? They would say like, obviously, how's school, how's work, but like having that open communication, I feel like there was I don't want to say barrier, but there definitely wasn't that openness that you have with your parents. And I've met your parents and they are so sweet. David, I feel like your personality really reflects on how they are. So I love that. But yeah, I did not have that growing up. How about you, Chris?
I think for me, it might be a little similar to yours, Alyssa, but I mean, my parents were always very involved. They're always very like, want to know what's going on in our lives. You know, we would eat dinner together probably every night, you know, watching TV, asking us about our day. I didn't think growing up that there were conversations or topics that I couldn't discuss. Maybe I just didn't think of it. Like, for example, finance, right? Like if I probably asked about money, I'm sure that they'd probably share some light of it, but it'd been more like just save your money and like, you know, make right decisions, as opposed to like, this is why we do this with our money and this is why we budget this way. But yeah, I think it was pretty open communication. I mean, I remember being able to go to my mom or my dad to ask a question. I think the one thing I can think of with my mom, though, is that she's very traditional in the sense that if I asked a question, it was more like, it's because it's this way because it is this way. You know what I mean? Or like maybe they called like old wives' tales, or like I just remember this one. This is a story. I hope my mom doesn't get mad. But like I remember,
shout out on to you. We love you,
mom. I love you. But it's like, this is hilarious because we might still always bring this up. It's like one day we were walking around our neighborhood and I kept walking around like this with my hands on my head, you know, and my mom was like, stop doing that. I think she just didn't like me doing it. And I was like, why? She goes, because you'll get hit by a car. I was like, what? You know what I mean? It's almost like using these things to scare somebody.
Dude, oh my god. Okay, so this is one of mine. Okay, so oh my god, that literally just brought back like flashbacks.
Yeah.
Like, so
did your mom do this?
It wasn't my maybe my mom did, but I definitely felt it more from like my Lola or my grandma.
Oh yeah.
And so we would, like, you know, when we were kids, we would go in and go into the house. And the first thing you do, take off your shoes, right? Take off your shoes. And then, but what you're supposed to do after you take off your shoes is put on slippers, right? And so, because we had slippers to, like, you know, I guess keep the floors clean or whatever. And then I would just like walk around without slippers. And then my grandma would be like, she's like, David, you got to put on slippers. I was like, why? She's like, because the floor is cold. And I was like, okay. She's like, you're going to get sick. I was like,
nice.
And it's like, the irony is that, like, you know, growing up and being in the medical field, is like, that's not really how that works anymore.
Wait, I have a story too.
Okay, yes. I think we all
So
do.
my mom would always tell me to never go to sleep with your hair wet. Well, that's like obvious because it's really bad for your scalp, right? But she would always tell me to not do it because it would make you blind.
Wow.
And I think that's carried with me up until this day,
Whoa.
even though I know it's not true. Hello. I know it's bad for your scalp, but I'm like, I'm going to go blind if I sleep with wet hair. So
I mean, it's funny that we like pick at things. I heard a similar story because I think my mom would tell my sister, don't go to sleep with your hair wet because you'll wake up with like headaches or something. I don't know if there's any scientific evidence to that, but
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's just been something that's been passed down. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that we all have, you know, like somewhat of a open communication. I mean, how's that changed now that, you know, or I guess as you got older, how has communication changed with your parents?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I mean, honestly, with my parents, I think not much has really changed, because like I said, you know, they're very like involved. They always like wanted to know what was going on. They're like the type of people that like they want to be informed. They want to be like to the point where, you know, my parents and I have had conversations about like they want to not only just know what I'm doing or like what I have planned to do with anything, but they also like want to understand like how I think. And I thought that was I didn't understand what that like really meant growing up, because they'd be like, I want to like know like how you're thinking, like your thought process. I want to know like you know, like how you make decisions. And I was like, why do you want to like know that, you know? Like I didn't really understand, but like growing up now, I really do. I value that. I value that they want to understand my, not just like, again, like what my plan is or what I'm doing, what I want to do, but like how I think and how I operate. And the reason why I say that I appreciate that more now is because that's also helped our communication. Like, because they understand like how I approach conversations, how I approach different challenges and things. And then also it's helped me also kind of like develop that relationship with them and like understanding, okay, like my dad kind of operates in this like way of thinking or approaching problems and conversations. My mom is very, very different. And then that's kind of like also help fine tune the way that we talk to each other. I think. What about you, Allysa?
I think for me, the biggest change that I've seen, and I think it's mainly because of me, it's because as I'm growing older, I'm kind of like, maybe these are things I should be discussing with my family. Because I feel like growing up, because we didn't have that really open communication like David had with his parents, I'm now starting to learn, okay, let me try talking to them about this. And sometimes regarding certain topics, I can tell that, they're not really used to talking about that, like my career path or like the things outside of what I'm doing right now. They can't really understand it, but I'm like introducing it little by little, and I'm kind of explaining why I'm doing it, because they don't really ask why. They're kind of just like, if they don't agree with it, then they're kind of just like, what? Why are you doing that? Where to the point where it kind of comes off as like, you don't understand. But I'm noticing that as I communicate with them the things that I'm doing, I try to help them understand so that they don't really bring off that feeling. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like I'm saying, it's really, I feel like it's a journey that I'm trying to navigate through. Most definitely right now.
Yeah. I guess I want to comment for you, David, like your experience is, you said it's kind of different where now they're trying to understand the process of what you're thinking. To me, when I hear that, it almost sounds like it's still kind of the same, because when you're growing up, they wanted to always ask why, right? With you. So I think they wanted to understand your critical thinking. And then now that you're older, it's like they're still asking you why, maybe just in a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think maybe even, I guess, maybe I think you're right. It's like they've kind of always done that. Now, like I'm kind of like reciprocating that. Like maybe that's kind of that's a good way to describe it. Yeah, I think you're right. Like they've always kind of just been they're genuinely interested in like the way that I thought, like the way that I approached challenges, and the way that I communicated. So maybe now it's more so like me, actually, like I'm now understanding, okay, maybe I should understand how they communicate. Maybe I should understand how they approach things, so that, it kind of streamlines the communication. And maybe just from my perspective, I see that I see it change. It's become more smooth because of that now we've all kind of fine-tuned and got to that level where we're understanding how we communicate, But I think one thing that I also maybe want to bring up is that, I guess, growing up, the negative that maybe kind of came out of that was that I felt that it was like almost like intrusive, you know what I mean? So it's like, especially like growing up as like a teenager, like you go through that phase where you just like kind of want to like be alone, or like I trying to isolate yourself. But then every time like my parents would like ask me questions, I just like would kind of shut down, sometimes. And I'd just be like, man, like, why are you trying to like get into my space or get into my head? I really felt that. I don't know, Chris, did you ever feel that way? Like when you communicate with your parents or whatnot back then?
What's interesting is I listened to I'm not sure if it was a podcast or maybe like a radio show with Joe Coy on it, and he was just telling his experience about his son. And his son, I think, is like, he's either 20 or 18.
Yeah.
But he was saying like once his kid hit like 13, like they weren't like best friends anymore. And it's only because his son like was just like, nah, you're not cool anymore, Dad. I don't want to deal with you. I got my own thing. It kind of like secluded himself to his room. And then it wasn't until he hit probably like 18 again when he's like found his way back to his dad. And he was telling parents, like, if you have a son, like, and he somehow is like no longer really in your life when he's 13, they always come back around 18. And I was like, dude, he's speaking that to me right now, because that's what happened to me. Not that I drifted away from my parents, but I noticed that I did start to be more in my room. I stopped talking to my parents. I was a little more like not as expressive or like as open in communication. It was more by choice, because I think when you're going through like puberty or you're growing up, you're going through your life thing, it's like, well, the only people that understand me right now is my friends or people who think like me at the moment, you know. It wasn't until I became older and became more mature and probably the prefrontal cortex developed sorry, David, that I realized that no, my parents are actually know what's up, you know what I mean? But that's where I want to get to, that because like the communication changed, you know what I mean? So if they did ask me like questions of the why, it was more intrusive than trying to understand the thought process, you know what I mean? But I'm not sure if it's more just maybe a maturity thing, or maybe just the understanding why they were asking me certain questions, or maybe why they want to know these things about me. And I guess I want to ask you, Allysa, as like growing up Filipina, like at one point, you know, you growing up, did the communication change? Did the relationship change a little bit with your parents?
I mean, not drastically. But I think growing up, one thing that I've realized is just how important it is too, because I don't think my parents will listen to this, but I obviously, you know, teenage girls, especially when you're, for example, not supposed to have boyfriends, not supposed to be yada, 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 like you don't really share that with your parents. So I feel like I kind of went through what you guys went through as well. But growing up, I'm just like, looking back, I'm like, why did I make that such a big deal? Because it is not a big deal. You know, normal things happen. Life happens, you know, and it's like, you can't always suppress your feelings. You go through what you go through. And I feel like in some ways, communicating with them, I'm like, it would have made my life 10 times more easier than just me going through it alone, me going through it with my friends who I couldn't even see because I can't even drive, you know? So I'm just like, so I don't know, just going back, I feel like I've realized moving forward, I've realized now just how I mean, I always know how important my family is. They're like my everything, right? So I'm really just trying to hone into that and just be like, at the end of the day, they're my family. And, you know, whether or not they support me, I'm going to let them know what's going on, you know? Yeah. And I feel like that's one thing that I'm constantly striving for, just letting them know how I feel, even though sometimes I get too in my head, even though I feel like they won't understand, at least I'm planting the seed, I guess, in a way. So they're not surprised, you know?
Yeah. So. And when you said that there were a few things that you don't know how to approach a conversation with your parents, like you're still learning that, you're still work in progress. That's similar to me, I think, because there's some topics that I want to, now that I'm older, I'm like asking them about finances, their finances. I'm asking about their retirement and if they're ready for this, you know, because I mean, as we get older, I mean, even if you're younger, you probably want to worry about that for your parents and if they're going to be taken care of, you know what I mean? And I think, at least from my experience, is just bring up the conversation in a certain setting, you know, obviously at home when you guys are together, maybe having dinner or something. For me, it's like just bringing it up, you know what I mean? And also your why, like why you're bringing it up, you know what I mean? Because I think just like growing up, we're like, why are you asking me all these questions? It's like, no, I want to know because I want to make sure that you're taken care of, you know what I mean? I want to make sure, because if when you get older and you're not financially ready for retirement or for that stage in life, like I don't want to have this burden of knowing that now I have to take care of my family and then I have to worry about you, not in a selfish way, but because I care and love for you. I care for you and I love you, and I want to make sure that you're okay. You know, explaining first as you ask these questions. That's what's helped for me, at least. I mean, with David,
I love that.
Okay.
No, that makes complete sense. I'm just curious, like, were there certain things that growing up like were off topic, or I mean not off limits, that you could talk about? And I don't know if there were, because I know that there's like some like there are some like stereotypical things as far as like Filipinos are concerned, I think, that, you know, you're not supposed to talk about. But I remember also one time I don't even remember how old I was. Maybe I was like 13 or 14. I asked we were in like the family room, and I asked my parents, I was like, was like, how much money do you guys make? And then, like, I just randomly, and they were just like,
how dare you?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, that was kind of the response. That was literally the response. They're like, why would you ask us that? I was like, I just want to know what you make. Like, how much money do we have? You know, they're like, it was like a don't worry about that, or like, you know, don't even think about that. Or
yeah.
So that was one thing. Like, what about you guys? You guys, were there topics, like, Allysa, for you, like, were there topics in the household that like you couldn't talk about, or like they were kind of taboo almost?
I mean, of course. I mean, as a girl, I mean, maybe it's just me too. I'm just like, I don't want to have, you know, the talk with my parents, because it's like, I'm not even supposed to have a boyfriend. Why would I ask about that? So didn't get that talk, but I got the talk from another elder / mentor. So that was like awkward too. So I got it somewhere, but just not from my parents. How about you, Chris?
I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I think I kind of remember asking my parents about like how much money we have, or like, are we rich? Are we rich? You know what I mean? Like, are we good? Maybe not.
I feel like that's such a David question.
But I know that that's something that we wouldn't talk about. You know what I mean? It was more or less like, oh no, we're fine. You know.
My parents would always say, like, we're blessed. We're blessed.
Oh yeah.
They should defer to that.
Yeah. My mom says this thing where it's like, I don't want to be rich. I never want to be rich. I don't want to forget God, is what she says to me. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That is so cute.
Shout out, Auntie, if you're listening. We love you.
But I'm trying to think of if there's anything else. How about for you, days? Was it just money that you know that you feel like you can't? I mean, there's obviously some awkward things that you probably don't want to bring up to your parents.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think if there's anything that was just off limits.
Feeling.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Chris, I know I know something came up. I think something popped up into your head.
Oh, I think for me it was like I couldn't tell them if I was like hurting from like a relationship or something, you know what I mean? But of course they could tell, you know, because they probably went through it, most likely went through in their lives, especially like a mom knows what's going on with their kids, have that like second nature or whatever. But it's like I probably felt like I couldn't until it was time to like break down, you know, like those type of emotions. I just couldn't. And I think it's because one thing, I didn't want them to worry, but two, also because I think maybe just that stereotypical, like I had to, like machismo, you know, I had to be tough, I had to be strong, you know. But you know, eventually, of course, I was able to be emotional in front of my parents, you know, let them know what's going on. How about for you guys?
I feel like I didn't really open up to my parents how I felt, unless I really, really had to, like Chris said. But I had my sister for that. So if anything, I really went to her. She was my mom in a way. But I felt uncomfortable, especially with my dad. I feel like with my dad, no, like I would never really break down in front of him or like tell him what's going on. But with my mom, I feel like I would be more comfortable, but didn't really have that. I went to my sister most of the time. So how about you, David?
I think my parents are kind of different in that way, I guess. Like my mom is the more like emotional one. My dad is more like logical, I guess you can say. He's like an engineer, so he has that kind of like brain. And he's also it's just, again, it's just two different ways of like approaching problems. And like, I guess, you know, especially when I was younger, like trying to navigate that like emotional stress, or like that emotional like angst, I guess you could even say. They had two different approaches, and I definitely gravitated more towards like my mom with that. And I felt like, you know, this has changed, of course, like over the years, but back then I felt that I could go to my mom for more of that stuff. I could go to like the more like emotional stuff, but like a lot of the analytical stuff, I could go to like my dad for. So it's just interesting. It's just an interesting dynamic. But then now I think my dad's definitely, opened up in that way. And we have a lot more conversations about, being more open, like as far as like how we feel, how things make us feel, even like how actually conversations that we have with each other make us feel. And so that's kind of also helped us too in the way that we communicate. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting the way that things kind of change over time. Did you guys have like a difference in the way that you guys communicated with each parent? Because I know that not all the time are you communicating with both or interacting with both. But was there a difference for you, Chris? Like, what about mom versus dad or something like that?
Definitely would probably go to my mom for more emotional stuff and like more analytical stuff, like you said, for my dad. At one point with my dad, it's like I never had a bad relationship with my dad. My dad was always very loving, very like always wanted to be involved, like I mentioned before. But it's like at one point I felt like we didn't know what to talk about with each other, which is really interesting. You know what I mean? Because I feel like at a certain age I was just like, because I was going probably through college and he was working his job, and I think we just couldn't really find anything that we had in common. I guess we had some common interests, so that's what I leaned on, right? I leaned on like, do you hear about the Bulls and what I mean? And then they'd be like, yeah. And it's like, did you hear about, what I mean? Something like that. Like kind of almost like what you see in some movies, you know what I mean?
Interesting.
And it's not like we had a bad relationship. It was just that for some reason we just couldn't click in that kind of way. And I would notice that him and my sister would like really be able to get along and really talk. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, what do
you think that was?
What's wrong with me?
Yeah. What do you think it was?
I don't know, man. I don't know if I was being a douche. Like, I would cut that out. Like, I don't want to say that. I was being negative. I'll keep that in. But I was thinking like, there's nothing I could talk with him. I wasn't given enough of a chance or something. Or maybe I just didn't tell him. And I still haven't told him. Like, wasn't there a period of our life where we just felt like we couldn't really talk about, or not that I couldn't talk to, but we didn't really have lengthy conversations. Like we would ride in the car together and we wouldn't really say much, except for like, oh, what's going on? How's things? You know what I mean? And then it started picking up when like I started to like get ready to get married and like get more, I guess I started figuring things out with my life, I think. And maybe that's where we started to get more in common, where like we started to become family men. It was just like, you know what I mean? That's probably where we could find that common ground. And it wasn't like leaning on superficial stuff like, oh, did you catch the basketball game or whatever. It was more like life, like really life. Because at the time, maybe we couldn't relate because I was going through school and like he didn't get like a college degree. He got like he got an associate degree, but was taking like online classes, but he didn't get his career through college. He would join the Navy. You know what I mean? So he probably didn't know how to communicate with me to understand like what was going on with school. You know what I mean? It wasn't until like now I have a career. So like, how is work? Like how's work life, work politics? Like, like how they treating you there? Something like that, I guess. Sorry, that was really, really long, but
no, that's very insightful. I think, cause I guess Allysa, for you, like, so, I mean, was there a difference when you were talking with your parents, like communicating with your dad versus your mom, but also, kind of to like what Chris is saying, did the conversations ever like kind of dry up? I don't know. I've never.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Definitely. So Chris, everything you're saying, I can totally relate. And I am honestly surprised because for me, yes, I would feel comfortable more going to my mom and, I saw her more often and things like that. But my dad, like, I don't know, I am a daddy's girl, you guys, but sometimes I would find it hard to be like, okay, what do we talk about? Like, is it just me? Because I feel like he has more of a fun relationship with my sister. And maybe he just takes me a little bit more too seriously because
interesting.
I don't know. So I relate with you, Chris, like to the T. I really do relate with you, but it's so weird because I am a daddy's girl for sure. Like when he's hurting, I'm like 10 times hurting. But with my mom, I see her more, even growing up, I see her more as a best friend than a mom, and I know how much of a strong woman she is. So I'm just like, I don't gotta worry about with you. But it's like with my dad, it's like, I don't know. I like have a very, very soft spot for my dad. So it's weird, even though we don't have that best friend type of relationship that I have with my mom. I would literally die for my dad, like no question, you know? So it's so weird, but yeah. And I also want to put this out there. I hope I don't seem like I'm like saying I don't have any communication with my parents, because that has definitely changed. And like I mentioned, it is a work in progress, you know, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I was just going to comment on that actually, because I think kind of to what you just said, literally, that it's not just verbal communication, you know, because like maybe verbally you communicate better with your mom, but like, you know, there's still so much other, there's so many other things said like non-verbally that maybe that's why, like, you know, nothing maybe needs to be said with your dad, but that, like, you know, like you said, when he's hurting, like I'm hurting, you know, like that just you know, that gets communicated in some way. And yeah, it's, I don't know, that's that, I just thought of that. I was just like,
it's love languages. It's love languages.
Oh, right.
So it's like, even though me and my dad didn't have as lengthy conversations, like we express love in different ways,
right?
You know, by enjoying each other's company, you know, by like, you know, him bringing something home for me, you know what I mean? There's different things like that we don't have to say much, but we know that we love each other so much. It's funny that we bring that up, because now that, you know, me and Allysa, my wife Allysa, live together, it's like I miss my parents. I mean, though we didn't always spend the whole day together, I miss knowing they're downstairs watching TV. You know, I miss knowing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like, I don't need to talk to you like the whole day, every day, like I talk to my wife now, but it's like, I miss your presence. I miss you being around. You know,
dude, you know what's crazy? Like, like when you just said that, like growing up, we, I used to hate this. I don't know. I used to hate this. Like we would, I'd be like, I would ask my parents, you know, like Sundays, you know, are normally free. But like my parents like wanted us to just like be home, you know, and I was like, I wanted to like go out or spend time with my friends or whatever. And they're just like, but they just wanted us to like be home, like just be present. And like, we weren't necessarily like doing anything. Like we honestly probably weren't even in the same like room most of the time. And they just like, there's like I was like, why do we have to do this? Like, why can't I go out? It's like, well, we just want to spend, like, we want to spend time with you. We're like, well, we're not even like doing anything together. It's just like, but like we're just like in the same room, like, you know, doing our own things, but like in the same room. And I to your point, bro, I didn't understand what that meant until like later on. It's just like, yeah, like your presence, just like you physically being there, doesn't, you don't even need to be like doing anything together, just like being in the same place together, you know. That's like that. Like, Allysa, did you ever like, what was that kind of like for you growing up? You know, did you have a kind of similar experience, or was it different?
I mean, I feel like when I went to college, I definitely missed my family, like hands down. First day I was like, my gosh, I want to go home. And I felt that way all throughout. So I feel like in a way it's a blessing being back home, because I'm like, it's only going, you know, years and years will keep going on. Eventually I'm going to have to really, really move out. So I'm really just cherishing the time that I have with my family. But for sure, I feel that. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I felt there's just like I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like there's a certain comfort. There's a comfort in like knowing that like they're there, right? And I mean, I don't know, like even now, I guess even during college too, like my parents now to the day, like my mom has an alarm set for 5 o'clock Pacific time to text me and Kimmy to like make sure like we're okay. And then literally same thing at like 9 o'clock our time Eastern, she'll like text us, be like, hey, are you guys like home? Like, what are you guys doing? So there's like, again, it's maybe just like that certain level of comfort, just knowing that they're like your kids are safe, and that now that they're not in the same, like they're not under the same roof, it's like that's still kind of innate in them, you know. So being able to communicate that across, I think, is just part of them, you know.
Yeah, that's the beauty of technology nowadays, you know, and because I mean, same thing with my family. My sister now has her own place down in San Diego, and so we're all like in different houses now. But we still pretty much text each other every day. You know, I try to call my mom every day during lunch just to check up on her. You know, I'm worried about her because like the worst things come in my head. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, what if she slips and falls and nobody's there? And like, you know what I mean? You start worrying for them. You're like, if I have to call her at 12 or something's gonna happen. You know what I mean? But it's the same thing. It's like, I mean, if we have the privilege of this technology and the opportunity to still have to talk to your loved ones, you know, why not? Why not? That's a different form of communication, right? It's not just those lengthy conversations. It's just that little, I'm thinking of you, you know?
Yeah. Or saying, I love you, or just doing something sweet, you know, and it doesn't even have to be grand. I think that's what I'm learning to do too. It's like, I just call my mom. Hi, Mom.
That's awesome.
What do you need? Nothing. Just want to talk, you know, just, yeah, I love that. I wanted to ask you guys, what are the traits that you think you inherited from both of your parents?
Oh man. Oh man.
That's a good question.
You want to go first, David?
I gotta think about that, but let me try and walk through my thoughts right now. So, I mean, there's a few, I think, from each. Probably like the main, well, I guess the ones that like come to the top of my mind, and I think that affect me like more on like a day-to-day basis from my dad. It's being like collected under stress. You know, his poise, his poise when problems happen, when there's a challenge, when there are like barriers ahead, foreseeing those things and then being like poised under stress. And I think that's and I like the instances come to mind where that's actually happened, like for example, like medical emergencies, like in the hospital. People have commented, be like, dude, like, how are you, like, you know, just like in the zone right now, like not stressing out. And like, I literally think back, just like, maybe that's can't come from like just seeing kind of my dad maybe operate under those circumstances. That's just like something that I picked up, and I'm thankful for that, you know? And then from my mom, I would say just like, just connection with people, you know, and you both know my mom, and so that like just being able to connect and take that genuine interest like in somebody. So like for the you know, for people listening, like my mom is the type of person where like she meets you once, she'll like ask you like what about your life story, pretty much, you know. And I think that's just something that I don't know, I love, and maybe that's something that's kind of like been passed down, like whether you know it's picked up through experience or something that I just watched her do. Yeah, that's, I think those are probably one of the two things. I mean, there's a host of them, but probably the two things that maybe just come to the top of mind first, that kind of help maybe describe just like who I am as a person, I guess. Like, what about you, Chris? That's a good question. Oh my gosh, like
that's a really good question.
That was great. That was great. You're next though, by the way. So
I know, right? So be prepared. But I guess I'll go off of the strengths test, strengths finder, right? And I'll think of where I get those strengths from. I would say from my dad, I get my level of empathy and trying to stay open-minded, you know, because he is in the family always making us to think of two sides of every story. And no matter, like with family, he always tells us like that family's family, and you always have to back up family, but keep in the mind in your head, like the back of your head, like if they're wrong, you have to remember and like approach them and tell them if they're wrong. You know what I mean? Just like always knowing that there's two sides of the story is what he would always tell me, you know? And then with my mom, I would say is my strength of belief. So like, I'm very like firm with faith, and like, but it's a good thing, but it could be a bad thing, because I feel like faith can almost go towards stubbornness, and like you believe in one thing and you don't want to let go. Like, this is how you do dishes, honey. You know what I mean? That's where I get that from my mom. You know what I mean? Which I love.
Don't put your hands up like this. To get hit by a car.
Don't put your head on. But and then from both, I would say I get strategy, because they've always taught me to be prepared, like 5 steps ahead, you know, like even with real world situations, like I would tell Allysa, like, are you putting this here because like in the morning, you can just easily grab it. You know what I mean? Something like that. I'm always trying to like think a few steps ahead. That's just a brief, thing that I've got from both of them. But how about for you, Allysa?
Man, how am I supposed to beat those?
No,
it's not a competition.
It's not a competition.
That's awesome. That's amazing. For me, I would have to say from my mom, it's her empathy. She feels for people. She doesn't only feel for people, she feels people.
That's true.
And Mama, can you cut this out, guys?
That's a perfect. She's like, "You talking about me,
bro? You gotta keep this in there.
You talking about me?"
Oh,
she felt that, bro. Like,
oh,
empathy, bro.
Exactly. It went through the walls, man. It went through the walls. That is amazing.
That was my mama.
Oh,
that was my grandma.
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
But my fault. I didn't lock the door. Anyways, yeah, she feels for people, and like to the point where it's like I literally need a day to be like, oh my gosh, I saw that homeless person. I literally just want to break down and cry for the rest of the day. Like that's how much she feels for people. She just has a big heart, and everyone who meets my mom, she's like, I want her to be my mom, because she's just so cool too, and she's so like loud and fun and funny. Like when I say she is my best friend, she is literally my best friend, you guys. I can hang out with her all day. And then I think from my dad, something that I got from him is loyalty. When you call him, when he knows it's his daughters, he will drop everything and do everything he can to come to our rescue. And like, that's the same with his friends. His faith is strong in that way too. He is loyal to his faith, and he is a down, you know what I mean? Like he is just loyal in that way. And I think from the both of them, something that I get from them is, you guys know me. I like the nicer things in life, but I feel like another part of me is just like, I don't need all the fancy and lavish things. They're very simple people, which I love, and they're very humble people. And I always try to, hone into that as much as blessings we get in this life. Like I always remember that we don't need it, they're happy with what they have. And I love that. I always try to emulate that. So
dang, that's awesome. No, all you guys, man. I think, and like I've met both of you guys as parents, and that's like it's accurate, like, or just like it like coming together to like fuse to like become the both of you, and I know there's like a lot of other things that have been passed down, like again, whether through experiences and whatnot, but those are huge. Oh man, that's just like, it's cool to think about, like how even those things, they're not necessarily like communicated verbally, but they're like communicated visually maybe, or they're communicated because you've watched their work ethic, or you've watched them do something like over and over and over again, and have showed you like how to be empathetic, or how to be loyal, or how to strategize, or whatever. It's like all those things that they don't need to be said. That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, man, it's behavior, right? That's why as we get older, as we have our children, it's like, it's not just what you tell your children, it's how you act around them, I think. Right. And I think our parents are testaments to that, because obviously some of us have had some barriers in communication, but we've taken so much more from them without them having to say it,
Yeah.
So
I love that
part.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Oh, that's a perfect way to put the cherry on top of that episode. That was beautiful.